Say.
I'm a bit of Fantaro.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the press. It's good to see you. We have brought these petitions as the umbrella for democratic change, or those candidates who were able to come within the very strict timelines set out by the Electoral Act. We have 16 parliamentary petitions which are before court, and the petitions really are about substantively the quality of democracy that we have in this country. And when you consider the quality of democracy, you look at the processes, you look at the outcome. And when you look at all these, you've got to be based on certain fundamental principles about elections. One of those principles, really, very basic one, is the one person, one vote principle. And any departure from that principle, in any shape or form, must vitiate the entire election if there was a departure from the one person, one vote. And many others that speak to the freeness and fairness of an election. And so we are here because we believe on very formidable evidence that there was a departure from all the known principles that underpin a free and fair election. Among other things, the one person, one vote principle was violated, because the evidence will show, when it is marshaled, that individuals were able to vote more than once. So it was no longer about one person, one vote. It was about one individual, multiple votes, distorting entirely the outcome of the election and vitiating ultimately any concept of the fairness of this election. This is what this claim, this challenge to the electoral outcome is about. We also have a situation of flagrant violations of the Electoral Act. We say, and the evidence will show, that contrary to the requirements of the Electoral Act, where any voter who registers to participate in the election must appear at the registration point before the registration officer personally, present, among other things, a valid national identity card, receive their election registration documentation, and then sign that election registration document. We have many people who were registered without their having to present themselves at the registration point. Many, in large numbers, whose names were collected and their ID numbers, and they were presented to certain election officials, and they were then issued with registration cards. We have people who presented themselves, registered lawfully, but were also issued with additional voter registration cards. Now, if this doesn't speak to the very pith and substance of what a fair election should be and the principle of one person, one vote, then nothing ever will. And so we want to dismiss the narrative that is being spread around, that the challenge to an unfair and an unlawful electoral outcome is an attempt to destabilize. In fact, clinging to a fraudulent outcome is what would result in instability. And I make this point solemnly because it is a point I've made myself when I argued some electoral petition before the Court of Appeal many years back. I said to them, if you close out people who have a genuine complaint about an election outcome, you encourage them to consider extra legal means to challenge an electoral outcome. So if you want to secure peace, if you want people to have faith and confidence in the electoral system, they must be able to come before a court and receive justice. So this is about justice. And justice, in our understanding as the umbrella for democratic change, is not to condone and embrace impropriety and injustice under color of maintaining peace. You don't maintain peace. You maintain a very fragile state of affairs. You place the country in a very precarious situation where the slightest spark might ignite serious civil strife. So the best way, and this is the most mature and democratic way, when you have a justiciable complaint in relation to elections, you bring election petitions. You bring them before the courts. You marshal evidence, which evidence is then tested and examined, and at the end the court must then make a determination. This is what we are about. But what I want to make known is, on the evidence that we've come across, we know that there was overbearing involvement of the Directorate on Intelligence and Security Services in these elections. They literally took over. They literally infiltrated the IEC. Whether with their collusion or outside their knowledge remains to be tested in court. But what we do know as a fact is that the IEC was in a lot of instances overrun by the DIS. And you know, some of you, that right before the elections we raised a complaint in relation to some gadgetry that was to be acquired from a German company operating out of Geneva in Switzerland, which was to be deployed in these. So that we complained. And when we did, the IEC came out and said, we never engaged with the DIS in relation to any gadgetry. So we were able to confirm that there was an attempt to get that gadgetry. The gadgetry was to be deployed in relation to the elections. And we learned from the IEC that it was without their knowledge and consent. So we know for a fact that well before these elections, the DIS has taken an active interest and involvement in these elections. This is something that amounts to a usurpation of the powers and functions of the IEC by the DIS. And it's something that is unlawful, something that vitiates entirely the whole process. And so, when the evidence suggests that the BDP set out to defraud the country, to defraud the nation, they understood and realized pretty early that they could not win these elections. And they haven't won these elections. It would be an exercise in grotesque dishonesty to remotely suggest that the BDP was successful in these elections. The BDP did not win. And the BDP, to their credit, realized well in advance that they would not win. And that a free and fair election would deliver a change of government. And so they set out, and the evidence indicates, to engineer, manufacture a fraudulent outcome to these elections. This is what the evidence suggests. Armed with this evidence, and we are convinced, because we've tested, we've checked this evidence, and it stacks up, and it's continuing to stack up. Armed with this evidence, a person who is bent on destabilizing would do what? Would draw a conclusion and destabilize. But a person who believes in the rule of law, such as myself and the petitioners and the umbrella for democratic change, armed with this evidence, would then be court and say to the court, here's the evidence. Let us examine it together. And in full public view, which is fortunately what the court has also countenanced. And so we have a situation where our evidence will find its way into court. The witnesses will testify, and it will be examined by the court, and it will show that there was an astronomical amount of fraud committed in these elections by the highest echelons of the DIS, and indeed the president and his henchmen, some of whom we mentioned by name. And so this is the reality. And so those who champion a false narrative of a north-south divide are either singularly dishonest or daft, in the sense that this outrageous outcome in the southern part of the country, engineered to try and feed this false narrative, is so outrageous that to fuel it find it very difficult to believe. That's why they are so subdued. They cannot celebrate openly, freely, and beat up their chests, because they know that what they claim to be the outcome is actually a fraudulent, contrived result. And this is what we say, and this is why we are in court today.
Okay, Mr.
So thank you very much, and I'll take a few questions, not many, basically about this. And you were there, you witnessed. I don't want to do any analysis of the submissions made by the eminent legal practitioners who appeared. That is for you to deal with, and the judges. But what I do say is the process, the entitlement for those who are aggrieved to come before court, to the seat of justice.
Okay.
That's what happens.
Okay, two questions. First one, what if you don't pass this part of the hearings? And let me also add the Abubedi. Abubedi is quite different. It has
nothing to do with this.
So we wanted to find out. No, I think even supporters by you this year, we really wanted to find out how have you been? There was talk about more kidnap you somewhere. How can all that? So maybe you got a
What was the first question again?
What if you don't pass?
Well, let's cross that bridge when we get to it. We believe very strongly on the submissions made that these points, most of them at any rate, are without merit. We expect that they will be dismissed. That's the way it should be, so that the evidence can be led. Except anywhere you say it was outside the time frame, if you can't bring yourself within the time frame, that's perfectly understandable. But we don't think there's any in relation to these petitions that stand to be thrown out on any of the basis advanced by the respondents.
Okay.
And so we believe that we will prevail.
Okay.
I have full faith and confidence in the petitions and in the manner in which they were presented. Where have I been? I've been around. You see, after the election, when you now are faced with an enormous fraudulent outcome, you need to focus on that. And I'm one person who doesn't speak unless I have something useful to say. I prefer rather to keep quiet. And so behind the scenes, I've been working on these petitions. Behind the scenes, I've been meeting the witnesses. I've been interviewing them together with the attorneys. We've been lining up, and I also participated in the preparation of some of the petitions and also ensuring that they are properly filed. So that's what I've been hard at work. And you must understand that in relation to petitions, you have very limited time within which to work. So you need to try and prepare your case as best you can within that limited time and make sure everything is done. So that's what I've been up to. And that is why, because I cannot argue myself, one, because I'm involved personally and directly, and secondly, because when you are the client and the attorney, you might just miss out certain things. You then bring others who have some serene detachment from the issues, who will look at them with some fair bit of objectivity. And that's why we brought these counsel, and who have no involvement in the local politics and some of the politics that does the rounds. And so this is what I've been up to. And those of the UDC who have, I know they've been very concerned about my welfare. I've been very well. And when you are a leader, in times of crisis, that's when you need to remain calm. And that's why I've said to them so many ways, chill in hellfire. You've got to go through hell to know whether you can be chill. Some have never been through hell and they don't know whether they can or cannot. That's why I always say to you, I've been down so many times down, don't bother me no more. I'm focused, firm, and we need to get over this and expose this fraud. Expose it for now and expose it for the future. Because if we don't, if we let the BDP get away with such astronomical levels of electoral fraud, then we may as well forget about any subsequent elections. 2024, they will go in, will contest 57, and they will win 100. Well, just let them walk away with everything. The corruption that they do in government, the levels of theft that they carry out, they have now taken into this particular sacred space of elections, and they've stolen this election. We need to stop there And it is our collective responsibility to do that. Any one of you who has any evidence or knows anybody who does must come forth. Not for me. It's not about me. It's not about each one of us. We must country. And so we need to be loyal, faithful unto that process. And that's what these petitions are about. We are faithful to the process. We are loyal to democracy. And we are loyal to peace and tranquility. And we don't want it disturbed by electoral fraudsters in the shape and form of President Masisi, Mr. Balopi, and others. So we are very serious and we are very committed.
So how is your relationship with BCP? Because one of the people petitions, particularly Vice President.
Well, rumors will always be there. I don't want to deal with those because I've not come across any such. I know that the umbrella for democratic change is fully behind these petitions. And I think if you were looking for any hint of indication from him, you would have listened to his response to the State of the Nation address. And I think that your concern might just be fully dealt with. So the umbrella for democratic change is united. United around two critical issues. One, loyalty, fidelity to democracy and democratic principles. And when those have been violated, there is no way in which your loyalty will only stop at the rhetoric of saying I'm committed to free and fair elections and you don't challenge these irregularities. So the umbrella for democratic change is a corollary of its fundamental commitment to elections and democracy must take up. And the umbrella for democratic change is united behind these petitions. BC, not saying BNF, BPP, BCP, because we went into these elections in that manner. And there's also another narrative that is being spun, which I reject and distance myself from, to try and disaggregate now. Now there's BNF, now there's BCP, no, there's UDC, and that's what it is. That's what will be. In fact, if you're looking for anything suggesting what may happen, the conference that was held at Baisaho by the UDC suggested at some point after these elections the consideration of a merger of these parties in some shape or form. So rather than a disaggregation, it's a consolidation of the aggregation. That's what those who've sounded the death knell are celebrating too soon. The umbrella for democratic change is robust, it's strong, it's resilient, and that's what.
Sure. So throughout the day, the constant mention here, the Kono in others case. What is this relative to this case?
Well, I don't want to venture into present legal analysis, but I think the issues brought down to brass tacks. An election petition is presented, suggesting massive irregularities. This will be led, and a petition will be attended by oral evidence in the court. That's what we say. There are others, obviously, who know, who have some premonition, or know what they did, and so do not want that evidence to come. It is also their right and entitlement, in terms of the processes and procedures of a court, to raise whatever issues they may want to raise. And that's why we entertain them, and that's why we do not begrudge them, because they will be considered by the court. And so we say, let all be considered. We will have a judgment. Kono basically is about these requirements that sustain or would destroy an election petition. Others say, you take, if something, see, if you take one of the examples, notice of presentation of petition. What is that?